Well, good afternoon, everybody. Today is October 7th, obviously, and this is a meeting of the Emergency Preparedness Committee of the Minnesota Geospatial Advisory Council. And since I'm going to blab on the back end of this with the webinar, we thought it'd be a good idea to have Randy run the admin part of the meeting, so you don't have to hear me drone on for 2 hours straight. Okay, with that, Randy, the shoe is yours. Off we go.
Okay. Well, as Steve says, I'm taking over with the first part of the meeting today, but all full disclosure, slides came from Steve. We went through them yesterday. He'll be my wingman this time, and I'm sure provide some additional detail and context as we go forward. So with that, make sure that I've got, okay, roll call. First of all, everybody should have registered. If you didn't register, what did you want?
Yeah, so we're good. I picked up James.
You still can register, I guess.
Yeah, I went through and picked up the folks that came in.
Okay.
Otherwise, so we're good. We're good to go.
Well, I would like to ask, if possible, turn on your cameras so we can make this a bit more personal and interactive. Encourage you to engage along the way to the extent that time allows in the conversation during the presentation. The first half is really just a lot of updates on recent activities and recent past activities. So encourage you to engage in that. Recording is on, and we do have at least two new members that have not attended one of these meetings in the past. Britta and pardon me, is there anybody else? Britta, if you'd like to just introduce yourself real quick, turn your camera on, introduce yourself.
Britta's she's
the one in the coffee shop. Might be
coffee shop in San Antonio, so gets extra credit for that.
Yep.
And the other one joining us today for the first time is Samantha Huggett, I believe is how you would say it. Is that correct, Samantha? And
we're not hearing.
And she's saying I've seemed to have lost audio. She's got it back now. But
all right. Is there anybody else that's attending an EPC meeting for the first time? Please unmute and introduce yourself.
Yeah, this is Shauna Schmidt. I'm from the Pollution Control Agency.
Okay, anybody else for the first time? We won't go through and introduce everybody.
Harvey Thurlifson, Minnesota Geological Survey.
Hi, welcome. Okay, otherwise there will be some time at the end. We'll keep the meeting open at the end of the agenda, and we can do some chatting then. Otherwise, as I said, feel free to engage along the way. So this is our agenda. The first half of the meeting is the administrative meeting, where we'll go through a variety of updates. There'll be a slight break in between. Then we'll turn it over to Steve for the second half of the meeting, which is the format that we always follow with these quarterly meetings, where we have some kind of a professional growth or technical meeting. And this time Steve is going to be doing that on the Undergrounds Utility Mapping Project team. And then at 4 o'clock we'll be done, but we can keep it open to chat further. So this is an official meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, then is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda as published.
Okay, and since we are virtual, we will vote by exception only. So does anybody not approve of the agenda?
You need a second.
We need a second. Is there a second on approval of the agenda?
I'll second.
Okay, and then by exception, does anybody not approve of the agenda? Okay, meeting agenda is approved. We will move forward. So just very quickly, the first half is the administrative meeting. We'll step through each of these individually. So first is the meet and greet. We did that. Approval of the agenda. We did that. So then some updates, issues, and good efforts. Steve's interjecting some comedy here, which I thought was kind of interesting. We can stop time. If you have one of these devices in your house someplace, I'm a little hesitant to push that button because I'm not sure how you would start it again. But anyway, Recent past events. Critical infrastructure project team has been meeting on a regular basis, monthly. I actually participate in that, but that is Stacy Stark meeting on a Friday of each month on a monthly basis. The MGAC, Minnesota Geospatial Advisory Council quarterly meeting was held on September 29th. Those are public meetings. They are available online if you want to attend. I encourage you to check that out. We are a committee under the MGAC, and then we have several teams under our committee. September 30th was the UUMPT, the Underground Utilities Mapping Project Team, and that's what Steve is going to be talking about later, but we will have an update as well. Upcoming events, the UUMPT at the Common Ground Alliance Conference in Orlando. Steve, you're actually going to be presenting there? Somebody from your team?
Getting on a jet Monday. There you go.
All right. Critical Infrastructure Project Team meets again for October. Clean Water Council policy vote. What does that entail, Steve?
Hopefully that is the endorsement of a policy that Victoria Reinhardt spearheaded with the clean
We'll touch
water.
on that a little bit too. Then U.S. National Grid Implementation Working Group. That's another subset or something that we really participate in, but it is a national effort to implement the U.S. National Grid nationally. We have participants from across the country participating in that. October 28th, UUMPT Large Group. October 29th, Minnesota GIS-LAS UUMPT, that's the actual UUMPT meeting at GIS-LAS, Steve?
Nope, you've got
Presenting?
Damon Knowlton and Bob Bisquez will be presenting online during that event about the effort.
Just to be clear, the Minnesota GIS-LAS is a consortium in Minnesota. It's been around for, boy, a bit 25, 30 years now, as a collaborative. And there's an annual conference, which is going to be held virtually this year. November 19th, Critical Infrastructure Project Team again, their November meeting. Another MGAC quarterly meeting in December. UUMPT large group meeting in December. Critical Infrastructure Project Team again. And then way out into March of next year, Global Excavation Safety Conference in Phoenix. And I believe UUMPT is going to attempt to make a presentation or have a presence there as well. Okay, people. This is one thing that I really didn't know a lot about, but I did a little bit of research. Dr. Paul Morin of the Polar Geospatial Center is leaving, and I did my own little research to try and understand a little bit more about the significance of this. He actually started this Polar Geospatial Center about 15 years ago, and I encourage you to go check out their website. There's a lot of good information in there. They've really taken responsibility for mapping both the Arctic and Antarctic regions to a very detailed level, and using some very innovative technology with stereo satellite imagery to create a very accurate high resolution digital elevation model, which is of course very useful for things like mapping for expeditions, as well as potentially tracking the effects of global warming. So that's quite interesting. So here's an article that I found about high resolution map of Antarctica, the most detailed yet. This is from 2018. And they've got something they call the reference elevation model of Antarctica. And it's really astounding to see the level of detail that they've been able to map. And it's not just the mapping, it's the techniques that have been developed that I think are astounding, with huge amounts of data, leveraging in collaboration with University of Illinois Blue Waters supercomputing center. So it's really astounding, the amount of data that they're actually processing. And there's a note out on the website that he is stepping down. And I noticed then looking down at staff, Jim Klassen, which I'm not sure if Jim Klassen is actually here. Jim Klassen has been a participant in this committee for quite a number of years. He works with Shared Geo and a number of other projects, and he's listed as staff. And I was hoping to get a comment from him. But if somebody, I'm sure somebody is much more familiar with Paul Moran and the Polar Geospatial Center. If you could give a quick comment on the significance of him leaving at this point, I'd appreciate it.
This is Harvey.
This is Brian, Randy.
Brian, go ahead.
Go ahead, Harvey. No, go ahead.
My name is Harvey Thorlifson. I'm director of the Minnesota Geological Survey, which is a center in the School of Earth and Environmental Sciences in the College of Science and Engineering, and the Polar Center that Paul Moran has built with his team is another center. And I think Paul just reached a leveling off point. He has put a tremendous effort into this over the past, all 15 years. And it was just time for another phase of his career. And we are now in the department, we're now initiating a search that is focusing on sedimentology, stratigraphy, and may well include a potential successor to Paul. And so I think Paul's departure is a testament to his astounding success. He engaged in a lot of intense activity in Washington, D.C. to arrange money and access to the imagery. And so and Paul and I have talked a lot over the years. So to summarize, Paul's departure is a declaration of victory, a celebration of his success, and it's just time for a different sort of person to be a successor. It's time for Paul to apply his skills to another phase of his career. So this is a wonderful success story. We can celebrate Paul's contributions and make way for his successor, who will be a different kind of person.
Thanks for those comments. Brian, did you have some words?
Yeah, it's Harvey, you really laid it out well. And when I met Paul back in 2010, it was sort of ironic. We were both diving into the same free access, if you want to call it, the commercial satellite imagery. I had been participating in that group in the federal level since like 2003 or 4. I can't remember what the year was. But I knew there was somebody else, diving into this imagery. I didn't realize it was Paul until actually one of the GIZO events at the university. I met him for the first time, but I had no idea as to the scale and what he and the rest of the crew, Claire Porter, Jim Klass, all the people you have listed up there, what they have done is a magnitude above in terms of data volume and processing. It's just astounding. And I mean, even to this day, I can't even wrap my head around, some of the petabytes, the petascale, the amount of data that was funneling through that. And I was just fortunate enough to dovetail with him on this Great Lakes project where Paul's group helped out immensely. And, we really pushed the envelope, but unfortunately the NRO and the NGA, that's a whole different politics of crap that goes on in Washington. That's really what changed over this past year. However, they are going to be letting out some new contracts, and they are specifying that this data is going to be made available again. But again, we'll see once these things are let out. But Paul just got frustrated with all the strings he was pulling at once to make this thing go. But it is a significant achievement.
Thanks, Brian. And we will have a slide here on the Great Lakes project as well, so you can comment further at that point. Anybody else? All right, thanks for those comments. And then a little more Steve humor. We have our own snow and ice terrain mapping issues sometimes in Minnesota, I guess. EPC IT. We have our own web presence, mgacepc.org, which is really the front end to get to a number of different websites and contacts. Along with that, MinGeo has created a SharePoint site, and it's being used by some of the other committees more heavily. We chose not to embrace that to a high degree. Steve had already been working on leveraging Google Sites to really build out a lot of the kind of collaboration tools that we need as a committee. And he spent a lot of time on this, and Google then kind of pulled the rug out and is, I guess, migrating their Sites platform to a new version. I was looking at this, Steve, and I'm wondering, the issue is we cannot simply convert to the new Sites platform?
Yeah, it doesn't come across clean.
Okay.
There's a
So
lot of
there are more
issues.
issues, so it's going to require a bunch more work. So given that, at the same time, Corey Richter, who is also the current, well, I forget your title. You're not officially chair, Corey, but anyway, Corey's leading a team with the GAC, the MGAC, to really develop a new platform that can be used by the GAC and will support all of this collaborative committee work. And they're really looking hard at using ArcGIS Hub, which is an Esri collaboration platform. And so we'll see what comes of that. That's certainly not something that's going to happen overnight. You know, with the Google Sites, Steve, I mean, I saw things like the sites won't work anymore, but it's obviously working now. I saw words that it was going to stop working on September 1st, but it seems
Yeah, they originally made it sound like it would like vanish. And then what they did was they just froze the site as it is. You can't edit it. But I think this is the point at which we want Corey to jump in and talk a little bit about what her efforts are and whether or not she needs any assistance or that kind of thing.
And sorry, my understanding is that Google forced the sites to the new format under whatever Google account the site was originally built under. So the new version should be there if you can gain access to the host account.
It did two things automatically at midnight on September 1st. It basically created a copy of your website as it existed, and then it sent it through this thing called Takeout. And then the other thing is it automatically converted your website to the new format. But because of the issues of the original sites was built for basically a large view monitor, and the new sites tries to be responsive to cell phones and, you know, tablets and the rest of it. It does not, with a site as intensive as what we had, it didn't convert cleanly. So we're going to have to do something. And I think Corey's probably leading the way that is going to get us to where we need to go. So I'll shut up. Corey. Go.
Thank you, everyone. So the effort, certainly there's several people leading in the effort here. I just happen to be one of the instigators, as I'm often called. So with this, you know, MinGeo, we're working closely with MinGeo, and Dan can chime in at any point here too, to look at a way to better present all of the Geospatial Advisory Council's information. So up here, the example of the Alaska Geospatial Council. This was an example of a hub site that we were able to take a look at and see that there are some new options for us to organize and present our information. So over time, as Steve and others are aware, we've had difficulties in making sure that our committee information was staying up to date, that the updates were getting, you know, sent up to MinGeo. MinGeo would apply them, they would go out. And it's a cumbersome process. And we're also limited with what the particular website has available to us. Well, seeing as we're a Geospatial Advisory Council, and MinGeo can make it available to us to use Hub, to use a geospatial solution, it makes sense that we would start moving toward something like that to present our information. The idea is, and right now at the roadmap, the data workflows are being looked at. So there are a couple teams that are in on this. There's the MGAC leadership, and those folks, we're going to be getting a new leadership team by December. As we move into, we just had a new council appointed. And then there's this web ad hoc team that's come together with representatives from different committees and different interests across teams, work groups, and folks in the GAC, as well as some MinGeo folks. So data workflows are being looked at right now, hammered out, figuring out the user permissions. So really looking at the mechanisms of how do we make it possible for committees and teams and work groups, people that are going to be the data producers, giving them more direct access into getting that information updated versus this kind of cumbersome process we have now. Now, it does mean that there will be some translation of some different committee sites that have been created, because that's the other thing is things have been created in a bunch of different areas, and we're not seeing this as an overnight transition at all. But we're looking to take the stuff that maybe people had to put out at the U and had to put in Google, had to put in all these different places, and bringing them back together into a unified platform somehow. So I imagine it's going to be a couple-year project. It will at least go to the end of my next term.
Well, good luck with that. And anybody that wants to assist or engage in that can contact you, Corey.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So just to add to what Corey said related to that, we're going to set up groups for you to manage your own content. Where there's no way Minjo can support all the content that you folks put together. Of course, we're going to help with the branding and some of the design and some of that stuff. But imagine that you will define some content developers in your committee here, and we'll likely set you up with one publisher so that when you get that content gets to the point where it can be reviewed by whoever that publisher is, and then push that button. It's very likely going to be Hub Premium, where you can do calendar events or calendars and events and those kinds of things as well, is what we're pursuing.
Great, thanks. Okay, other efforts, U.S. National Grid Institute. Steve's throwing a train wreck. It's far from a train wreck. It's really a personal initiative on the part of Steve to really drive the U.S. National Grid at a national level. I mentioned the implementation working group, and the U.S. National Grid Institute would be something that would essentially provide the materials and certifications for organizations that were implementing the U.S. National Grid. But along with that working group, I mean, if you just want to see some of the stuff, simply looking at the U.S. National Grid Wikipedia page, I think is significant. It was really pretty awful until somebody took the initiative to go in and update it. And now it's a good resource. I direct people here because it's real easy for people to find this. And it does link to a lot of other resources that are out there, including some of the stuff that we've been doing here in Minnesota. So I encourage you to go there as a starting point. It's very familiar to people. Oh, and other good efforts. More Steve humor. Oh, but there is an MGAC EPC YouTube channel. Encourage you to go and check that out. There are a number of entries out there. You can subscribe so that you can see when new additions are added there. These meetings are recorded and they are placed out there as well. So if you want to go back and look at a previous meeting, and there are a number of other things out there, like some of the U.S. National Grid presentations that we've been giving. So encourage you to go check that. We're at 1,200 plus views overall, but some of the we're seeing roughly an increase of 100 views per month. Obviously, it's not extreme, but it's something. And I think it's a really good start, and it certainly at least gives us a place where we can have a presence for some of the materials that we're creating. The Great Lakes Alliance for Remote Sensing, and again, I was aware of this. I know that we've had conversations about this in the past, and Brian just mentioned it as well. This is another significant thing. I believe that it's actually applying some of that technology that was created from the Polar Geospatial Center to using stereo satellite imagery to create a high resolution DEM along the shorelines and within the drainage basins of the Great Lakes, which is significant. And it's highly detailed. And on the website, if you go to glars.org, it also shows the collaboration here. And again, Shared Geo is here listed prominently. as well as the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I know that Steve has been involved in this and Brian's been involved in this, and just ask you to comment on the significance. I think Brian alluded to it a little bit ago, but if you could just explain for everybody's benefit what's going on here.
Yeah, this really stems back actually 30 years, back in the 1990s when I was with the NRCS in Madison, Wisconsin. Roger Gauthier with the Army Corps of Engineers was the lead person, if you want to call that, on the Great Lakes Regional Data Exchange. And this is just an evolution or a chapter in that program that he started. It really was, even today, is truly a binational communication about what is needed. And we were just able to tap into the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding back in 2010, actually, to do initially some wetland mapping and some other smaller projects around the basin. But then in 2016, after a detail over in Ottawa, I was able to sort of convince Canada and my counterparts with Michigan Tech, University of Minnesota Shared Geo, to really start diving into a collaborative wetland mapping program around the Great Lakes and focusing on the coastal wetlands. And we really were pushing the envelope here, again, using the sub-meter imagery, the optical, as well as the Canadian RadarSat-2 imagery in a collaborative effort to dive into these deeper technologies that are not necessarily free, but they were accessible through the military establishments. So, with this great teamwork, Jim Klassen and the Shared Geo folks, Nancy, Steve, Michigan Tech, that's Laura Chavez, Mike Battaglia in specific, and others, along with Joe Knight and Keith Pelletier and others as well. It was really a cat herding project to sort of take the strengths from each of these different organizations and tap into different products that could be taken from these images, such as water level changes and water extent with radar, flooded vegetation with radar, better raster-based wetland classifications with MTRI. I think Keith Pelletier was working on an image object approach with both the optical imagery as well as the derived surface model imagery, because the surface model, since it is temporal, is able to provide us the emergent wetland data set over time, along with shrubs and forested wetlands as another component for the classifications. And so a very unique project. It sort of wrapped up September 30th, but we still have an extension for another year to keep these products out there. But again, the challenge in all this isn't so much the technology, it's really educating both the bureaucrats in the different federal agencies, especially EPA, as well as the user community, to think outside the box is the challenge. Don't think about what you see today, from Landsat. Think about what's possible with these additional technologies, and that's where it is moving towards, because we can get at sub-meter imagery almost every day, every other day, I should say, with Digital Globe. Planet, you can get everyday imagery. Radar is becoming almost every day. And as Paul Marin said, the question isn't getting data anymore, remote sensing data. The question is, can you handle it? And he was absolutely right. It's a data volume, I wouldn't say exercise, it's a data volume dilemma to process this stuff and get it out to the user community. So with that, I'll shut up and let you go on, Randy.
Okay. What's the issue with letters of support with respect to what?
Steve was collecting a bunch of letters of support. I know Harvey and I did a couple for multiple organizations. Steve, I don't know if Steve's found it. I actually have a memorandum of understanding between the Canadian and U.S. government that's been signed off on by the NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, as well as Defense Canada, as well as Fish and Wildlife Service. So there is a multinational, if you want to call it, MOU out there that it may push this process over the hump to get EPA to say, hey, let's dive into this further. Because the real reason for this project isn't, even though I like to say it's for the habitat and wetlands and so forth for the Great Lakes, the real reason is because it's 20% or nearly 20% of the surface water of the planet. And what people don't realize is, and I've given this speech before, is in another 50, 100 years, with climate change, that 20% becomes 50%, assuming the Great Lakes don't change in area. In other words, it is a very significant global resource. And a few organizations, few people get that idea. And it's just taking a little bit of time to realize the importance of it. Luckily, with Betty McCollum here, helping support the program through the GLRI funding, we'll see where it goes.
Okay.
Randy, what I was going to chime in with was two. First off, is the environment is nothing more than a slow moving disaster. So it fits into kind of a way to think about the world, that it isn't just the ambulance running down the street. Another thing to think about is what's the other end of the spectrum, and that's the environment, because eventually it becomes a disaster for all of us if we don't do something about it. The second element is you ask about the letter of support thing. If anybody's interested in, either through their department or their organization, writing a letter of support, the idea behind that is number one, you can contact me and we've got a template that's available. And number two is the issue that EPA is as Brian indicated, the funding for this entire project ended on the 30th of September. And to the degree that that the potential downrange of getting the funding turned back on is largely driven by input from states as to what's important to them. So that's why I had that notes there on letters of support needed. So
Okay.
That's it.
All right. Next, Cobb County, Georgia. Cobb County, Georgia has been doing a fantastic job of implementing the U.S. National Grid through these emergency location markers. If you want to see a very strong presence and strong, very quick implementation, just do a Google search on Cobb County, Georgia and emergency location markers. You can find some really good information. This is a story map that they have out there that really goes through a lot of the detail with other resources. They've actually got a mobile friendly app that you can find to get more information, including an interactive map that shows the locations of all of the emergency location markers that they have implemented within the county, which is how many, Steve? A couple thousand?
They're well north of 3,000 now.
Wow. It's impressive, absolutely impressive. And then they've got a really nice YouTube video out there that explains for public education why they're doing this and why this is important. And I think it's a great resource for all of us to use. I will be using it myself as I'm talking to our Parks Department on trail signage. So it's really impressive what they're doing, and they're getting a lot of notice as well. There's a couple of links there, but really, if Google search is going to find everything that you need and get you started down that road. And now they're actually being very innovative and moving forward with some new formats of the emergency location markers. They look similar to the ones that you've seen. However, the one on the left is for a buoy in the water. They have a very large linear lake that they want to implement these, or where they want to implement the emergency location markers. And so that's a new design for a floating buoy. The one on the right is actually designed to be 3 feet by 5 feet in size and be on the shoreline. So it'll be visible from boats that are out in the lake at various key points around the lake. So that's pretty impressive to see them taking that kind of initiative. In Wisconsin, we're seeing a lot of interest in the U.S. National Grid. Steve and I have given some presentations over there and at some of their conferences recently, and we're seeing a lot of interest. The stars show counties that have expressed interest. The counties in the boxes are those that have recently voted to implement the emergency location markers on all of their trails. Dane County in southern Wisconsin, that's actually a county that hosts their capital, Madison. So that's very significant. And I think that what we're starting to see is some significant growth in the implementation of the U.S. National Grid emergency location markers outside of Minnesota. And I really think we've got to do a little better job here at home to keep up and really leverage these kinds of initiatives. So it's really good to see that. Okay. Did we forget anything? Any other victories or defeats that somebody wants to share? Hearing none, we'll move on to the project team reports. First is the leadership team. I am the vice chair. Steve is the chair, but along with me, Brian Huberty, Corey Richter, Stacy Stark, we all lead other teams within the committee. You can go online and you can find on the mgacepc.org website, you can find the quarterly and annual activity reports that are submitted to the GAC. And they are in a very well-defined format. Steve's done a good job of creating a template for us, so it's very easy for us to submit these on a quarterly basis. And these get incorporated in the GAC, the MGAC packets and materials as well, along with the same thing for other committees. If you want to join us, there are several ways that you can join. Simply sending an email to chair@mgacepc.org. You can also go to, if you go to mgacepc.org, it'll provide this kind of information about how to join. So obviously all of you know how to do that, but if you haven't formally joined, please go here and do so. So we have your contact information, can inform you about future meetings, but share this with others that may have an interest as well. And we do have 2 new members that have signed up, Samantha Huggett, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, and Britta Maddox. And they have both joined us today. We tried to do a quick introduction. I don't know if you want to try to introduce yourself one more time, Samantha. No audio. Okay, Britta, we were getting an echo from Britta. She's actually in a Starbucks in Arizona. Britta? Not hearing. Okay, no audio. Anyway, they've just recently joined us. And we do have a volunteer initiative, really driven by or headed by Corey. And Corey, you want to just explain this a little bit?
For sure. So back on the joining the EPC at the bottom, there was a link there that says Minnesota Geospatial Community Resiliency Volunteer Survey. So that's a way to get connected with a group of us that are all volunteers that are looking at ways to provide support for each other and you know, what we have to do to respond to emergencies in that. And part of this effort is we're looking to revitalize this GEMS program. So this idea of having a geospatial emergency management specialist certification that we can point to somebody and say, we've had the curriculum, the training, and this and that. So we can have, you know, kind of that one more little gold star for somebody as they're going to provide support in emergency management situations or others. So we are, the group has not gotten together since the summer. I've been a little delayed in getting everybody together for kind of a quarterly discussion. We have been building out quite a few resources for people within the group. So this is really a peer sharing thing. So the next step is we wanted to formalize this with the GEMS, and we're looking for some folks to really kind of take this on, go through and review, like, is our curriculum still current? Do we need to update it? Are there new things we need to add? Are the things actually more relevant depending on what area of support you're looking at doing? So please email me if you have any questions. And then also go to that link to sign up for the take the resilience volunteer survey to get included into the group so we can include you on our quarterly meetings. That right now we've managed a couple quarters, but we'll be a little late on our third quarter.
All right. Thanks for that, Corey. Okay, then the data critical infrastructure assessment team. Stacy Stark heads that up, and she was unable to attend at the last minute, but she did provide some slides that she wanted to share. And I'll step through this. I have participated. I do participate in the work group because it does have overlap into the work that I've done with the U.S. National Grid maps, where we want to be able to represent critical infrastructure on those maps. And we are looking for ways to really create a definitive source for critical infrastructure. And she arrived at the same need through the work that she's been doing with all hazard mitigation planning for counties. So they do have monthly meetings on the third Friday of each month. I'm sure that she'd be happy to involve anybody else who is interested in this. She does have a number of people that are involved. The primary goal is to identify workflows to validate local data and share statewide data sets appropriately. And they're really identifying some initial data sets, but then looking more holistically at all of the potential data sets that may fall under this kind of a category. Secondary goals are to identify the authoritative sources and long-term stewards of the data, promote verification and sharing of data within Minnesota, raise awareness about the importance of critical infrastructure data, identify workflows to have data reflected in national data sets and base maps, the Highfield, Esri base maps, OpenStreetMaps, and others. And that's one of the first things that I did, is go and look for the appropriate sources for things, simple things like police stations, fire stations, hospitals, pharmacies, things like that. And those data sources exist at the national level in multiple places, and they aren't all the same. And that's the problem. So how do we rectify that? And not only how do we build our own, but then how do we feed that up back into those national data sets? And I know that's what she's looking at. She's starting with fire station data. And so they really created a data model, assembled an initial data set, and defined a database schema with all of the appropriate fields and the definitions of those fields for the initial data set. And the intent is to publish that, raise awareness of it, and have some public peer review of that data. She did present at the Minnesota Emergency Managers Conference along with Matt Goodman, and they presented the actual use cases of multi-jurisdictional data set needs for St. Louis County, presented actual reality of data set limitations, and discussed opportunities for participation and verification of data. So I know I've experienced this myself in working and giving presentations at the emergency managers conferences and things like that. I also participate with the Metro Emergency Managers Association as a member. And there's an assumption that we magically have it all and that it is magically updated. And really that just puts the burden on us to actually make that happen. There's, I think, no reason that they shouldn't expect that it can happen. That's really what she's tackling. Next steps are to develop some standards for some initial data sets. And I know that she's looking at police stations, fire stations, hospitals, schools, things that are relatively easy because we already have an initial data set, and something that we can really leverage to increase the awareness of this issue. Aggregate the best available data and post it on the Minnesota Geospatial Commons. Develop a website on the MinGeo web page for the best available sources for some of those national data sets, and then outreach to state agencies, GIS professionals, and the emergency management community. And Stacy would be very happy to hear from anybody through email if you're interested in engaging in this effort. So, any questions about that? Okay. Then moving on. So here is an interactive application that Stacy has put up that has the Emergency Operations Center, fire stations, and law enforcement center or law enforcement facilities across the state. So it's just an interactive map that can be used to help understand the problem and see the data that's available. The data underground map and underground utilities mapping. Steve, you want to say a few things? I know you're going to do the whole second hour on this. And we have 15 minutes left here. So
Yeah, no, the only things I wanted to point out here were two things. First, this is the goal of that you're going to hear about when I talk in the second half hour is how do we get to this? And the answer is if we keep doing what we're doing right now, we will never get there. So the second half of this event, the webinar presentation is going to talk about what's ongoing in Minnesota right now to solve this problem of the total lack of visual understanding of what's beneath our feet. And flip to the next slide, Randy. And very few times in life will you ever get to see the big picture. Here's the big picture, and I'll do a quick walkthrough of this in that second part. That's all I got for right now. It's a tickler. It's a,
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's it.
My control here. Education, Corey, you've already talked about GEMS. I don't know if you're aware of the GPS portion. Steve and I had a conversation. Shared Geo has about 100 GPS units with supporting training materials, and it'd be nice to have somebody just take control of that and find a way to leverage that in schools or some other program. Do you have anything else to add, Corey?
We'll figure that out. So we'll add that in.
It's an interesting resource, but just for everybody's information, there is a resource out there that'd be great for teaching a land nav course, or I can do U.S. National Grid training with it. So it'd be nice to see that used.
We could do the damage assessment data collection too. Like,
True.
Since we did that big project with building a data standard.
Yes. Okay, then we have outreach, which is vacant. If anybody wants to participate in that, and that's, I believe, a combination of raising awareness of what our committee activities, as well as just raising awareness of GIS for emergency management, emergency preparedness. And response geospatial assistance. Brian, do you have anything recent about this topic? It's been assigned to you. Silence is deafening.
Say that again.
Your silence is deafening.
No, I'm on another call. I'm a busy person this afternoon. Go ahead.
Oh, well, it's any updates on this topic of geospatial assistance?
No, because I haven't wrapped my head around it.
All right. Well, that's where Brian intends to go. In the area of response, situational awareness sharing initiative. Shared Geo created this minsave.org application, which is really pretty interesting. It's a very easy URL for you to remember. Just go check it out, minsave.org. It has a number of different layers related to emergency management, including here I've turned on police stations, fire stations, and hospitals. And it really does a great presentation. It's an interactive map, so you zoom in, and all those numbers represent an aggregation of those locations in the vicinity. And I think it's a really nice presentation of that kind of data, and I'm sure it's going to embrace the data sets that Stacy's creating. Encourage you to check that out. U.S. National Grid, that's me. The main thing is there is an interactive application out there that shows map books. And one thing that we've been working on is a mechanism that would allow anybody in the country to register a map series or map books with this application. And so we're working on a web form where I can submit my name and my email address. The whole idea is that we create these polygon squares that represent maps. So when you click on a map, on a square, you get a map. So each of those squares in Wisconsin will bring up a map, and it's both street maps and aerial maps. And so what we do is create a map index for that. It's in the form of a JSON file. So every one of those little squares has its own JSON record, as well as the large, the thick blue outline represents the total extents of all of the maps. And that then is a JSON file. And what I can do is put those on the web and then simply provide that URL in this web form, and it will then be registered in the application. It'll bring in all of that JSON, and then present it as on the interactive map, so that over time we can have other agencies and individuals publish their maps in this application as well. So I'm pretty excited about that. All right, that brings us to the end of the project team reports and into old business and new business. Is there any old business to discuss? Okay, hearing none. Is there any new business to discuss? Hearing none. Takes us to the end, the closing comments. Steve, we've been doing this, we had done for a number of years, this Broken Compass Award, and really highlighted failures. And, you know, that's pretty discouraging. And so actually Steve took the initiative and changed it, make it a positive award. And so now it's the leadership award for GIS and emergency management. And we think we may have actually given this one already in the past, but we want to award it and recognize Victoria Reinhardt. There was a significant presentation at the last Geospatial Advisory Council meeting by Steve on the underground utilities mapping project. And really the discussion really focused on developing some kind of a policy statement that would come from the Clean Water Council. And Victoria Reinhardt is a county commissioner for Ramsey County. She's been there for quite a while, but she's been heavily involved in GIS for quite a number of years, both in Metro GIS and now with the GAC as well. And it's really nice to have somebody at her level in policymaking involved in GIS activities. She's a strong supporter of all of the work that we do, and offered to draft this policy statement that would then be adopted by the Clean Water Council, which she also participates in. So it's really great to see that. Encourage you to do a Google search on Victoria Reinhardt. You'll see all of the great GIS stuff that she's doing. Anybody have a further comment on Victoria? You know, she's really been a stalwart in the GIS community.
Yeah, Randy, I would just second your comments and I guess more or less leave it at that. This policy statement, as you see here, is in draft form, and we're looking for a vote at the full Clean Water Council meeting that will occur either next Monday or in November. And Paul, I always want to say Grant or Gardner, and I can't keep it straight. I think it's Paul Gardner, who leads the effort with, if you will, doing the administrative piece to support the Clean Water Council, is working to just try to get things lined up for the agenda. So we should be hearing back about that shortly. But it's significant in that getting any kind of level of support that the Clean Water Council includes a number of state legislators and other well-placed people in the state. So it'd be significant to get their endorsement, and that will only help this underground utilities mapping project team effort going forward. So it's significant and much appreciated, and none of it would have happened without Victoria. So it is significant. Thank you.
Okay, then the last item is the next meeting. We have set a date of December 15th. You know, whether or not it's in person or online, it'd be nice to meet in person. We certainly, you know, enjoy the opportunity to get together in person. But with current Delta variant and increasing cases, it's kind of just a discouraging situation. And I know that state agencies, and I know that at Dakota County, we are discouraged from meeting in person, or even, you know, strongly encouraged not to have in-person meetings and to meet virtually. Personally, I think that a hybrid meeting would be at least the best, because it is nice to be able to have people join that otherwise might not be in the state or in the vicinity of the location for the meeting. So we're planning on being virtual for sure, but it could be in person as well, or some hybrid of the two. But we do need a topic. Steve is going to give us the presentation today. but we always do like to have a presentation. If you have ideas, please send an email to Steve or myself. And if you, even if you wouldn't do it yourself, if you just have an idea or you know of somebody or you've seen a presentation that you think would be a good one to carry forward here in this forum, let us know, and or just have a chat with us, and we'll see what we can put together. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn the administrative meeting?
Randy, can I just,
Yes.
one quick thing, Dan Ross had put in the chat that he would like to see a member of this committee participate at the NISJIC EPC level. So.
I have presented to that group, and I do have contacts with them.
Something for the members of this group to consider. There's a strong cross-state discussion that's always going on there. And I think that the group really builds off one another.
Yes.
And I just think there's some great opportunity, not only to share what's happening here in Minnesota, but to learn from some of those other very advanced states like Oregon and Washington and some of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Steve and I can discuss that. Yeah, I would like to participate in that. Yes, I think that's a good idea, Dan. Thanks. Anybody else have any final comments?
Dan, I just want to ask a quick question about, it seems to me NISJIC has a requirement for you to participate in those committees that you have to be a member, and
I'll take care of that.
okay. All right. Just wanted to
So
make sure.
whoever you define, let me know, because it's
Okay.
time for me to send in the new list of
Okay.
Minnesota participants.
Okay. We'll take care of it. Thank you, Dan.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other final comments or a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, if there are no objections, if there are any objections, please say so now. Hearing none, we are adjourned for this portion. And how's that for timing, Steve?
Pretty fine, actually. Okay. It's your chance to go do a bathroom break, or
Or chat.
we're not policing. You might grab a cold one. I
Mike
don't
is
know.
all, open your mic and feel free to chat. And we will convene at 3 in case anybody chooses to join us at that point just for that presentation. Otherwise, I'll hand it back to you, Steve. I'll stop sharing my screen.